If you've been keeping up with my acquaintance, An Awesome Person, then you'll recognize this as the printer from last month. It's far from the best Minecraft printer ever. It only prints to a 5x4x1 area, has only 2 colors, it's slow, and it only takes input from a very long and clunky tape. But the important part is that it works, and An Awesome Person was okay with this design. Okay, so I started with just the base and the triple piston extender that I got from one of Mumbo Jumbo's videos. But if you actually watched An Awesome Person's video, you might be thinking, wait, there were 4 pistons, why isn't this a quadruple piston extender? Well, in a real quadruple piston extender, it would look something like this. This block would go all the way out, and then there would be some extra circuitry that would make all 4 pistons pull this block all the way back. Since all the concrete powder blocks just had to go all the way out, fall down, and didn't have to come back, I only needed something that was less complicated than a quadruple piston extender. Okay, so now I'm going to explain how this triple piston extender works, and if you're already like a Minecraft pro and already know everything, you can skip the next few minutes of this video. Just break this redstone so I can focus on only the magenta part. So the redstone signal first goes to these 2 places. So basically what this repeater is supposed to do is when the thing turns on, this piston, or these 2 turn on first, so this piston pushes outward, and then this thing turns on. So as you can see, this piston gets pushed here onto the redstone, or onto where the redstone can turn it on, and then pushes this thing here. Yeah, and then when I turn this thing off, these 2 turn off first because of the repeater, and then this part turns off. And then after the magenta part of the circuit has already turned off, the pistons look like this. And then what I need to happen is to have this piston turn on and off, then this piston, and then this piston again, and it has to be in this exact order, which is why the repeaters are delayed like this. This sticky piston right here has a real purpose, which I am going to show you by removing it. So I'm going to turn this thing off now, and you see what happens is that this piston pushes out and it doesn't go back. Same with this one. We need the sticky piston here to make it so that so this is the after the magenta part turns off, this is the first piston that extends, right? We need the sticky, what the sticky piston here does is make it so that when this piston extends, it pulls back immediately. So then what these 2 pistons can immediately start pulling this piston back. So with the sticky piston, this is what it looks like. Nope. Yay, it worked. In case you haven't noticed, the magenta part and the sticky piston are connected by a repeater and a torch, which have pretty simple purposes. The repeater is there to delay the orange circuit so it turns on only after the magenta circuit completely turns off, and the redstone torch makes it so that it turns on when the magenta part turns off. So now that I have a working triple piston extender, the next thing I need to do is adding the 4th piston. And if I just try this, it's not going to work. When the redstone gets here, this piston pushes, when this piston gets pushed here, it turns on, and these other pistons back here can't push this turned on piston, even though, like, they're all turned on, or this one's turned on right now, but it can't do anything because it can't push this piston. One thing I can try is turning this off and then setting a delay here. This piston pushes forward before this piston can turn on and become unmovable, and it kind of works. But now this piston turns off late, so this piston here can't pull it back. So we need something to make this piston here turn on last but turn off first. My solution was to build this redstone clock. So as you can see, there are 4 colors. Each of them will eventually correspond to one of the 4 pistons. And how this works is that the piston will be connected to both this top wire and this bottom wire, and it will be on whenever either of these wires is on. So as you can see, the signal goes there to there, and then it goes back the other way. So the purple piston will turn on first and turn off last every time. And having this on all the time makes building kind of annoying, so there, now I can turn this on and off whenever I want. Okay, each piston is now connected, so I'm gonna flip this lever, and it doesn't work because the redstone power from this repeater is going in here. So I'm gonna do this. So as you can see, redstone can't go this way through a repeater. So if I just do this for all of the wires, it should solve the problem. Okay, there, I just did it for all the wires. Okay, so I think you were able to see that the pistons were moving way too fast and didn't have enough time for this thing to fully contract. So I added a bunch of repeaters here, and now let's see. So as you can see here, when this piston was pulling back, it didn't pull this piston because it was going too fast. So I'm going to delay the off circuit even further, and now let's see. And great, it works now. Okay, so now this printer needs to actually print something. So I got the sand and the pistons right here. I'm going to connect them to, well, like, these pistons only need to push out a sand block and immediately pull back in. I'm going to connect them to this thing that, as I explained earlier, it turns on and back off really quickly, and for testing purposes I'm going to use only one color of sand. Pistons are pushing out the sand way too fast. it's falling around here and then getting pushed all the way out here, even though there's supposed to be nothing under it. So I'm just going to add more repeaters to slow down this thing. Okay, so now I have this repeater right here, making sure this piston doesn't push until all of these fully contract. And then I have a bunch of repeaters right here that make sure these pistons don't start extending until this sand falls down to where it should be. So now I'm going to make it work. After the first column fills up, the sand should start going to the second column. So okay, so as you can see, the pistons are still pushing this sand way too fast. It can be pushed all the way out here before it even starts falling. Okay, so I extended the repeaters down here, which should make it so that the pistons extend much more slowly. Gonna restock the sand. And it should work now. Yeah, a lot slower, but it works now. Or the next problem I need to deal with is make the printer able to print either color of sand. Okay, so this thing is now slightly less racist, I guess. And I have this gray part set up here so that, or when this part is off, piston pushing the black powder is supposed to be off. Since there's a redstone torch here, it inverts the signal, so this piston here is on. And already we see a problem that this piston is extended even though it's only supposed to be extended when there's a signal coming up from here. So we need to make a circuit so that this piston extends only when there's a signal coming from here and there's a signal coming up from down here. So what we're going to need is an AND gate. In case you don't know how AND gates work, 2 inputs, one here and one here, both go into redstone torches. Well, and then when both inputs are on, both of these torches are off. So then this torch turns on. Here there's no redstone torch because there was already a redstone torch before. And to reverse that torch, I just had to, replace it with a repeater. Anyways, the next problem is that I need to somehow figure out how to turn this part on and off whenever I want so that the concrete powder there gets pushed into the correct pattern. This was my solution. So glass is a transparent block. If I put it into this gap right here, as you can see, nothing happens. It's just like as if there was air there. But stone is not transparent. If I put it here, this part turns on, and I chose stone and glass instead of just air because both of these blocks can be moved by pistons. So the next thing I need to do is to build a bunch of pistons to push these stone and glass blocks around. Now I have a piston right here, and even a little message I want to spell out, and I have attached this piston to this light gray part because I want this piston to turn on immediately after these two. So let's test it. So one problem that's already pretty obvious is that this piston is just pushing air now, and we need more pistons over there feeding the tape or whatever into this piston. I have added more pistons. So I'm gonna have these two pistons run on their own little clock here, because I don't think they need to be connected to that big one. So I'm going to start it now. And first problem is that when the piston pushes the block over here, it kind of breaks the redstone. And second is that this piston is still pushing air. To fix the first problem, I added a furnace here because apparently pistons can't push furnaces. And I also put one here too. And for the second problem, I created a stone generator. The idea is that after this piston pushes out, a stone block forms there which the piston can continue pushing. So, yep, it's not pushing anything because there's a furnace here. Oh hey, the tape reader worked properly. See how when there was a stone there, it dropped black sand instead of white sand? Okay, so if you were paying attention, you would have seen that the redstone here just turned on, but the piston didn't move because there are too many blocks in front of it. So we are going to need ways to make this machine stop working when I want it to stop working and not just when there are 12 blocks here. So to make sure this doesn't stop early when it reaches the 12 block limit, I put another piston here that pushes a bunch of the blocks in that direction. This piston does in fact need to be wired up to the same clock as this piston. I need to make sure this piston always pushes after this one, because if they try to push at the same time, this one gets stuck, and it's pretty important to not have this piston stuck, because it's gonna print the wrong thing here. But this piston can run on its own clock, because if this piston gets stuck, it'll just try to push again in like 1 second later. Less than 1 second later, so I don't really care if this one gets stuck. To make sure the printer does not keep going on for too long, I have this redstone block here. And when it's done printing the redstone, or when the redstone block moves over to where this cyan part is, that means it's done printing, and this piston will push this cyan block here to cut the wire and stop the printer. I just did a quick off-camera test for this thing, and it turns out this thing shuts off a tiny bit too early, so to make it shut off on time, I'm going to make it turn off a tiny bit later, just by doing that. I hope that was the last bug, and I think now is the time to find out. Yeah, I think this is a good camera angle. This took a lot longer than I expected, but overall it was pretty fun to build and debug this thing. And Sorry this video came out so late. I had a lot of real life stuff in the past 3 months. So I'm looking forward to winter break and seeing what an awesome person comes up with in January, and hopefully it'll be on time next time. And I wish y'all have a happy Christmas and a Merry New Year. Also, this printer is kind of slow, so you'll just have to watch it print stuff for the next 2 minutes. And it appears to work. Yeah, I know it's just the letter C, but it's hard to be creative when you have literally only 20 pixels to print.